Hello, everyone. How beautiful it is. Just an amazing moment in time, realizing that we're in the midst of timelessness and realizing that miracles are happening every moment. We have a very, very special miracle happening right now. Mary is about to become a grandmother. And so, congratulations, Mary.
Thank you.
Uh, we're just thrilled for you and thrilled for Melissa. She is in labor at this very moment, welcoming in a new holy child into this embodiment on the human plane.
Mm.
Oh, how beautiful it is. And to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Marj Britt. I'm the founder of Called by Love Institute. And this series of classes on this story or dialogues, conversations on the soul story. And definitely we have a soul story going on today because I saw so many synchronicities as I talked with Victor earlier in the week. And how beautiful it is to have Victor here today. Victor Dougherty is the leader, the head teacher, the primary person. I don't know what
The
other titles to give you,
muckety
Victor.
muck is one of them.
Say that again.
The head muckety muck.
Oh, well, I've
Ancient
never even
Buddhist
thought of that
term.
one. At the Temple Buddhist Center. And actually, I didn't personally know Victor until I moved back to Kansas City. I knew Nian, his former wife, and she had been to Unity of Tustin and had spoken there. So we had a connection. And I think that this is the way the universe often works. We're all one. And then we lose track of each other as we come back into the human plane and with commitments to meet again, with commitments to fulfill a divine promise and a divine purpose. And then, interestingly enough, we forget our commitments because that is required as we lower our vibration enough in order to come into embodiment. And so we're all, every single one of us on this planet, in the process of awakening, in the process of finding our real, with a capital R, self, with a capital S, that part of us that is directly connected to the one self, the essence of the all that is, called by many names. It can be called Christ consciousness, it can be called Buddha consciousness, it can be called the all that is, it can be called the one self, it can be called Victor, it can be called Marla, it can be called Garth, it can be called Mary, it can be called Marj. It doesn't care what you call it. It just wants to know you, to be one with you. And interestingly, that one self, that essence of all that is yearning for you more than you are yearning for it. It knows you well. It's known you in every event of your life, in every lifetime. And it is cheering you on all the way. And so, on this auspicious day of Melissa, Mary's daughter, about to give birth to Mary's first grandchild, a holy child is coming into embodiment in this very moment. How beautiful that is. And we are about to talk about those holy moments as Victor and I begin our dialogue But first, before we do that, I want to talk, I want to do the invocation. And then after Victor and I finish with our dialogue, what I will do is talk about one of the reasons why these dialogues, we've now had a few of them, and these dialogues are so significant to me. And that will come in the last half of our the last 30 minutes probably of our program today. And so let's do the invocation together. And as we simply come into the awareness of the all that is, and we simply say, "Oh, beloved one, precious one, Holy Spirit, called by many names, come upon us. Fill us with your presence. Fill us with your power. Fill us with your knowing. Fill us with your being, that you may speak through us, that you may live through us, that you may be us, individualized in the world." And we simply say once more, "Come, Holy Spirit. Come, precious one. Come, Holy Spirit." And so it is. And so,
Thank you, Marj.
welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
And what I want to share with all of you is that Victor and I got together, I guess it's last week now, spent a couple of hours together here at Holly, in this beautiful, beautiful location that I know is a gift of God. I call it a God job. I had never imagined any place like Holly as being the place I would continue my work, the place that I would spend the rest of my life potentially. And Victor and I were sitting at the table having deep, deep conversations. And well, first we sat on the couch in the living room and looked at pictures on his iPhone or iPad. And we chose or five, six that he forwarded to me. And I chose four that I forwarded it to Mary. And Mary is working as part of the team for Called by Love. And we welcome Mary and Ross as team members and board members, actually both team members and board members. And now Garth is joining the team. So it's gradually reshaping itself, rebirthing itself, which is what happens as changes occur in our lives, as we go through changes ourselves, as I did when Ed said to me, "Marj, it's time for you to move back to Kansas City." He doesn't remember as vividly as I do, probably, because for me, it was that moment of recognizing spirit speaking through another soul, spirit understanding more than either soul understood. And as I've come back to Kansas City, the birthplace of the unity movement, I can see so clearly why I was called to be back here. It just all makes sense now. And we're going to be talking about the different stages of our soul story and how they manifest in our lives. And that is such an important part of our awareness and our own awakening into the all that is. We seem to mature in ways that baby souls who are just being born begin to mature. Child development has been around for a long time. And when I was back at the University of Massachusetts and doing my doctoral work, there were people who understood Piaget, for example, and people who child development was totally well known and well accepted. Adult development wasn't. We're just beginning to recognize that. And so be aware that Mary and I and Ross have taken the deep dives into those realms with people who have taken the deep dives with some of the master teachers of our time, like the deep dives that Mary and Ross and I have taken into the stages of consciousness with Terry O'Fallon, who worked directly with Ken Wilber in Integral, as she went beyond the things that had been identified and known and understood. So we're in new realms. And Victor, let's come back to some of the pictures that you chose. But first of all, is there anything you would like to say to introduce yourself before we begin to take some of the deep dives into the pictures?
Well, thank you, Marge. I'm happy to be here with everybody. I love, what you're doing, and I love seeing you on Sundays when you visit us at Unity Temple on the Plaza, which is where Temple Buddhist Center is housed. We have one of the chapels inside Unity Temple on the Plaza that we work out of. And I also thought it was kind of interesting that even though Marge lives north of the river and I live way south of the river, she lives on Holly, and I live on Holly. I thought that was a fun, interesting little synchronicity. Even though we're literally 20 miles apart from each other, we both live on Holly Street.
And Victor, I've not told you this, but I used to drive down Holly every single day when I lived at the apartments just beyond where you are on Holly, the ones that were designed for the TWA air hostesses when they were in training. Yes. And I lived in one of those apartments on the third floor, top floor, for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and that's I'm on the third floor.
Amazing. It's a good floor to be on. Spirit, soul, and body. And spirit's on the third floor.
Right on. So thank you again for having me.
So Victor, one of the things that I found totally amazing when you and I had our deep dive conversation was you beginning to tell me about where you were born. What was the state you were born in?
So I was actually born in Arkansas, and then we moved away when I was very young to California and spent a year or two at California, and then came to Kansas City when I was about 3.5.
So Arkansas to California and back to Kansas City.
Yeah.
And tell me about your birth father.
So my mother, she met a fellow, and they fell in love, but he did not have plans for a family. And so when he found out that my mother was pregnant with me, he's like, I can't do this. And so he disappeared. And so Mom had about 2 years there where she was a single mother trying to take care of a little baby. That was one of the reasons why she moved to California, was to try to find work. And there were some relatives there that could perhaps be of help. And then she met my stepfather, Red Dougherty, and when I was about 2.5, maybe 3 years old, and they wanted to come to Kansas City because he had work here. So they moved to Kansas City, and that's pretty much where my memory picks up. I don't remember anything before 3, really.
And so the father that you remember is actually the person whose name you now carry into
Yes,
your
yes,
adult life.
yes, yes. And so he
And
adopted me. Yeah, he's my stepfather. He adopted me, and so I actually never really met my biological father. And I did kind of do a half-hearted when I was, I think I might have been in my 20s, kind of a half-hearted search to see if I could find him, and I did a few things, looked around here and there, and then eventually just kind of lost interest because it really didn't have a lot of meaning for me. My stepfather was the only father I knew, and so I'm fine with that. I don't really need to know. It wouldn't change anything.
and your mother had some background that was interesting for me because
Yeah.
some commonalities with my son's life, and also my husband who died had the same kind of background. Tell me about your mother's background.
Yeah, so well, mom was, she would do anything, as far as working goes. She would be an accountant. I mean, she a bookkeeper or things like that. So she would do anything that she could to try to help, sustain the family. Like I said, she would do bookwork or be a waitress. She had a short stint as a model in California for a little while, modeling for at a car dealership. When they would take pictures of cars, they would like to have a model nearby. But mom also had, because of the way she was raised, got into alcoholism. And so she struggled with alcoholism, but she really, 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 really wanted a baby. Had several prior attempts that that were not successful. They ended in miscarriages. And so I was the third attempt, and she gave up drinking. She's like, she just was doing everything she possibly could to nurture the baby, and so that worked. And then I was born, and for a couple of years things were fine. However, mom did fall back into alcoholism because my stepfather was a traveling salesman. And so he worked very, very hard to sustain the family. He was a good man, but he was gone a lot. As a traveling salesman, he would leave on Mondays and would not return until Friday night late, or sometimes not even until Saturday morning, because he was working the 4-state area. So he traveled quite a bit. And this was very, very difficult for mom. It was very hard for her to... she still felt like she was raising me basically by herself, but my stepfather did supply us both with a stable home, as far as it was secure and it was safe and it was a good home in Prairie Village, Kansas. And so there was that. We all have our difficulties and our demons, so to speak. And so she fell back into alcoholism. So growing up as a child, there was definitely some difficulties with dad being gone, and with mom sometimes emotionally not really available because of the alcoholism. You had to kind of take on that little man of the house kind of a thing at 7, 8, 9 years of age. I was kind of the man of the house. And so I would try to have to take care of things even as a young child, which, are conditioning, right? Whether you call it or believe in karmic tendencies or conditioning, these were what we call in Buddhism, these were the causes and conditions for certain kinds of conditioned patterns of speech and behavior to form. So as a young child, I kind of sort of became not only an entertainer, but also a little bit of a control freak, because that's what was asked of me at 8 years of age. And so the entertainer part of it was, with mom not being emotionally available and dad being physically gone, as a young child, one of the coping mechanisms or strategies that I developed was I was very funny, and I could sing and I could dance and I could do all kinds of things. And as a young child, this was a strategy to get people to like me and not leave me. And so that strategy stayed with me for many, many, many years until I had an awakened experience later on. But we can talk about that later.
So I thank you so much. And before we leave your mom and her struggle with alcoholism, she finally found relief from that through an organization. Do you just briefly want to mention that?
Yeah, was it the you mean through AA?
Yes.
Yeah. So mom started, she, like many of us, she would try to quit and, fall off the wagon, so to speak, a few times until she finally found AA, and that it stuck after that. And she, was able to break free of the alcoholism, and, really start to build her life up. And she went on, believe it or not, to become a drug and alcohol rehabilitation counselor, so a recovery counselor, and was working for Catholic Charities and also for the state of Kansas, and then later on the state of Florida, as a recovery counselor. So she really took that, what was a kind of a shame for her in her life, and she turned that around to become a person that can be there and help people, the credible messengers, so to speak. She became a credible messenger.
And this is where I saw another commonality in your life and my life, because Paul, to whom I was married for 23 years, had over 40 years of being in AA.
Mm.
And used to teach at Harmony and Estes Park and do silent retreats. And we did silent retreats together, some in Estes Park, Colorado, some in California, some here in Kansas City. And so the 12-step path, especially in AA, is very much a spiritual journey. And I've always admired how David Hawkins talks about it as one of the most powerful of all of the spiritual paths, because it includes all of the necessities.
Yeah.
Like inventory, taking an inventory and asking for forgiveness in a way that is non-harmful, and all of the elements of the 12 steps. And ultimately, the 11th step is about meditation and the stillness, the silence. And the 12th step is about coming in and
Yeah.
back into the marketplace and helping others.
Yeah.
So,
Well, in Buddhism, Buddhism and the 12 step, specifically 12-step recovery path, they share a lot of commonalities. I mean, Buddhism is a number system, right? It was that way because it was an oral tradition. So that's why you have the Four Noble Truths, or the Eightfold Noble Path, the 52 mind states, the three poisons, stuff like that. So having the 12 steps, is just like having the 8 steps of the Eightfold Noble Path. And also, more importantly, it's that self-inquiry and self-discipline. I mean, that you could sum up the whole Buddhist path with self-inquiry and self-discipline, and that's what the 12-step program really highlights that, and asks you to do inventory and to really observe your patterns of speech and behavior. So honestly, they're very much sisters in that respect.
so I love the picture we chose from your childhood. And I'm just going to hold it up here. It's this one up here in the corner for those of you who want to refer back to it in your email. Tell us about, is there anything else about yourself in that picture at that age that you would like to say, well, this is what my life was about in
Yeah.
the first act of my life, which is from birth until you're about 25 years old. Some basic
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, well, and and we talk about in the Buddhist practice, we talk about something called karmic tendencies. And so that's some aspect of karma that has come with you into this particular existence or realm that you find yourself in. And so, we don't choose our families, so to speak. We don't choose when and where, we are born into existence. So the blessing is that I those things occurred, the alcoholic mother, the absent father, those things occurred, but there was still always love. And was blessed with just always being a very, here's that kind of that golden shadow. Because I was an only child, you would think that they would be like, an only child sometimes wants to, oh no, these are my toys, this is my stuff. But for whatever reason, I was incredibly inclusive as a child. I always wanted to share my toys with everybody, and I wanted people to enjoy the things that I was doing. And so that absence of family created the longing for family, to find it anywhere and everywhere that I could, and that's still with me today. So those things that happen to us, we come to a point realizing that they don't happen to us; they're happening for us. And so all those things that occurred in my childhood, even though some people might say, "Oh boy, that was too bad, that was rough," no, it was another brick in the foundation of becoming, who and what and where I am now. So that's all been built on those foundations.
That's interestingly another thing that you and I share, Victor. I only had one sibling, my brother Willard, and he's now passed. He was the person who passed before Ed came and said, Marj, it's time for you to move back to Kansas City. And that was one of the catapults. His death was a catapult
Mm,
to land me on my next path, on
yes.
my next platform, which was going to be in Kansas City. I
Mm.
had no intention of my human mind
Right.
ever move back to where there was ice and snow
Right.
again. And yet, clearly, it was part of a divine plan that in my human mind, did not see. Uh, I would get glimpses, and the friendship that Ed and I had that we maintained over 50 years was one of those glimpses. But now I can see much more clearly that my spiritual family, many of them here in Kansas City, are that replacement of the human family that I no longer have.
Yeah.
I have some cousins and I have a niece, but what I'm remembering is when your mother died, when she passed through the veils, one of the things that I did was make a donation to the Temple Buddhist Center in her honor, and sent you a text and saying,
Yeah.
Victor, I would love to be your spiritual mother. Because you're just about the kind of, how old are you, Victor?
I'm 62 now, believe it or not. I'm 62 going on 14.
And my son would have been 64.
Oh,
And so you're very close to the age of my own son. And
yeah.
I think I relate to that. I have found the people who are part of my spiritual family and Mary and Ross are each part of this, have become part of my spiritual family that is missing in my life. And how perfect that is. It's like living on the third floor of the apartment building.
Yes, yes.
Spirit, soul, and body. The human awareness is the body, the physical expression of this lifetime. The soul awareness is eternal, and yet it's individualized. It's not the awareness of the all that is, but it's our individualized connection to spirit. And then the third floor is the connection to the vastness, the all that is. And so it's very interesting to look at. So I'm going to go to the next picture in your life. And it says, Olathe's Got Talent. Talk to us about that picture.
Well, so it's so interesting, upon retrospect, it's easy to look back and just be amazed at how everything was leading up to now. It's kind of like I like to tell people that my whole life has prepared me for this moment. But of course, when you're, in your 20s and 30s, you don't know that. You can't understand that yet. And so when I grew up, I finished college, and I wanted to be a teacher. I really loved teaching, and I loved education. And also, I mean, when you think about it, that's in front of a group, right? So there's that little entertainer that sprouted when I was very, very young. I enjoyed being in front of a group. I didn't care what it was. And so teaching was an absolute natural for me. And so I taught for about 23 years, public high school. Go
What
ahead.
did you teach? What was your class primarily that Olathe's Got Talent?
Yeah. So for those 23 years that I taught in public high school, I directed the theater programs and also taught some speech and a little bit of debate as well. So I kind of had kids with me from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. every day. They might have been rehearsing for something, and that photo that you have there in the email was just one of the many programs that I was asked to direct within the community of Olathe, Kansas, because as the theater director, the community would often lean on me, or for helping with production of other events in town. And so the Olathe Has Talent program, I was approached by the city of Olathe itself to do this little program to raise money for scholarships for marginalized and underprivileged students within our district, so that we could get them food and backpacks and things like that. So we had Olathe's Got Talent, and I directed that for about 7 years at the same time that I was directing musicals and plays at my high school. So let's just say that busyness, I came to learn later on in my life that the busyness was a form of avoidance. In the Buddhist practice, we are on the lookout for clinging and aversion. And so aversion is, I don't have to feel certain things if I can stay super busy. And wow, I think I mastered multitasking, overly busy person.
And tell me a couple of your favorite musicals.
Oh my goodness, my all-time favorite musical, as I produced it twice even, was called Once on This Island. And it's basically the musical version of Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Little Mermaid. And so it doesn't have a little mermaid in it. So it's the musical version, but it is about a young boy of high wealth on the Antilles, the French Antilles Islands. He crashed his car over on the impoverished side, and of course a young girl found him and nurtured him back to health and took care of him, and then tried to live in his world. So you see where the Little Mermaid thing creeped in. But that was one of my all-time favorites. And then I loved, anything by Stephen Sondheim. Into the Woods, we did that 2 or 3 times. And then countless little plays and vignettes and things like that. So I really, really enjoyed my years there. And here's why it's also very interesting is that gave me a set of skills, what you might call an eye to production, so to speak. And that's playing out now in my life as the director of the Temple Buddhist Center in being able to produce a Sunday morning service. I have certain skill sets with electronics and technology and things like that, which actually goes right to that other picture that you had there, showing me standing in front of the curtain. There's something being projected onto the curtain, which is a meditating Buddha, and that's called a gobo, a G-O-B-O, which is a little round metal wafer that you can have made. You can have anything you want to put on it, and then it goes into a theatrical light and projects that image onto the wall. And this is a theatrical thing. So I learned that in my years of theater.
So the other thing that you learned sort of by accident relates to this picture. The one on the bottom showing a woman in a wedding gown.
Yes, that's one of my wedding pictures. And so I had the wonderful opportunity let me back up just for a second. After 23 years of teaching, I decided that I felt like I needed a sabbatical. You know, I wasn't running from the school or kids or teaching. I still loved all that. But 23 years, I just kept feeling like I need some space. I need some time. I had no idea what was going on. And so for a while, about a year, I just traveled around Unity churches for the most part, doing music. As a singer-songwriter, I would play songs and I would do music. And sometimes they would ask me to speak. And so I would talk a little bit about various different things. And so one of the things that I did a lot of was I played music at the Unity Seminary in Lee Summit, Missouri, which is where the worldwide headquarters is for Unity, and the seminary was there. And so the students were required to do at least 2 mock services. And they had to find their own musicians, they had to find their own platform, so it was good practice. And I was in a pool of musicians and singers that would participate in the service by providing music. And so that's where I met Nian, and she was at the seminary getting ordained as a Unity minister. And so she came to one of these mock services, and we met, and we fell in love, and then we got married. And so we were married for about 4 or 5 years, and actually did a lot of co-ministry together.
And also in that picture, there's 2 women on each side of you and Nian.
Uh-huh.
The 2 women.
Yeah, her mama and my mama.
So we got your mama in the picture.
Yes, always.
And so she is the one standing next to you.
Yeah.
And the one next to Nian is her mother.
Her
and
mama.
Her mother is from
Vietnam. Nian actually her family fled Vietnam during the fall of Saigon. They were living in Saigon, and so they literally left with whatever was on their body, and managed to successfully flee the country and come to California, and then Nian was at Tustin, and she kind of got her calling. There was also another one, Marin County. There was a Unity in Marin.
Yes.
She was at that one as well. And she got her calling, and that's when she kind of gave up everything she owned, filled her car with whatever she needed, drove to Kansas City to go to the seminary and become a minister. And that's where we met. And so, yeah.
And it's amazing how all of this kind of weaves itself together. Little pieces of it. In my book, I call it the 1,000-piece puzzle of your life. Each little piece is like one piece of the puzzle, and you can begin to build the framework. Look at where the straight edges are, for example.
Yeah.
you can begin to build the framework, and then you look for the colors that are there.
Mhm.
And you can look for where the sky is. You can look for where the earth is.
Right on.
All of the different colors. And how did you learn so much about unity? Because now you're at Unity on the Plaza teaching in the Temple Buddhist Center, but you weave Buddhism and unity get together in quite interesting ways, as does Robert Brummett.
Yeah. Yes, so that kind of takes us into this next, I guess, chapter in my life. So Nina and I, she became the associate minister at Unity Temple. I was still on sabbatical because I went on sabbatical for 2 years, and so I was still on sabbatical. So I started leading some men's groups, some meditation groups, some things like that. And that was during the time when the senior minister at Unity Temple, Duke Tufty, that's when he kind of was watching me. And so he pulled me to his office one day and said, you know, Victor, I want to go in a new direction with a new director for our Temple Buddhist Center, which is where I started. So I came to Temple Buddhist Center in 2005. And I came there like many people who come to a spiritual or come to understand and be aware of their spiritual path, because frankly, we're all on a spiritual path. We just sometimes don't know it. And so I became aware of my spiritual path in 2004. And it was a very, very traumatic divorce, and my whole life just crumbled in literally one day. And so I started seeing a therapist because I knew I was in a lot of trouble, because a lot of really, really dark thoughts. It was the dark night of the soul I was experiencing. I didn't know that at the time. And so I started seeing a therapist, and after about 3 visits, he said, Victor, I don't think you're having a mental crisis. I think you're having a spiritual one. So I want you to go see my friend Ben Worth at the Temple Buddhist Center. And the reason why he sent me there was because of a lot of the things I was talking about. I was free falling, and the only thing that made any sense to me was this little book that I picked up at the thrift store called Buddhism is Not What You Think. And it really resonated with me. And so I was talking like that to my therapist. And that's when he said, go to Temple Buddhist Center. So I went there in 2004 and was absolutely overwhelmed with how much this resonated with me, and I really clung on to it. And I couldn't read enough, I couldn't meditate enough, I couldn't go on enough retreats, I couldn't get enough time with my teacher, who I still meet with to this day once a week. Every Saturday morning we have coffee together. And so that's when, though, fast forward now to 2016, 2017, Duke saw me doing these meditation groups and stuff and said, I want you to take over the Temple Buddhist Center. And so I ran back to my teacher, Ben, who started it back in 2004, and I said, Ben, he wants me to take over the Sangha. I'm not ready for that. And he says, you know how you know you're ready? Because it was offered to you. So I kind of mustered up the courage, and I told the school district, well, I guess I'm not coming back. It was very, very scary to say that, because 23 years is quite an investment. I still love kids and teaching, but that sabbatical, unbeknownst to me, was the universe working through me through causes and conditions. I needed to leave that for a short time so that this could show up. We have to make space for our true nature to arise and to come through. And so by making space, you know, if I had just dabbled with Buddhism and doing stuff and still kept my job, I don't think things would have turned out the way they did. So I actually left the job, went on sabbatical, no pay, no insurance, and it was very, very scary. And then all of a sudden, boom, this showed up. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't asking for it. I thought I was going to be a singer-songwriter traveling all around the world singing at Unity churches. But what is it? Life is what happens while you're making other plans.
Yes. And
So
that could be applicable to finding our purpose. It's what
yeah,
happens while
yeah.
you're making other plans.
Exactly. And the truth is the purpose finds you. You don't find it. You know, the head's probably got all kinds of ideas about what you're gonna do and what you're not gonna do. But if you're focused on that, then you're not open and aware of what the heart says. Oh, that, I want to do that. I'm like, wait, what? I'm
Well,
gonna live on donations and run a Buddhist temple? If you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have thought you were stark raving mad. Even though I've always practiced, ever since 2004, the Buddhist practice has been very, very near and dear to me, and I practice quite diligently.
that's beautiful. And I also remember the story you told me about when Nian was in ministerial school. And that's interesting because here's another thread in our lives.
Mhm.
I was on the seminary board of the ministerial school when
Oh,
it became called a seminary, shifting from ministerial school to being called a Unity Institute and Seminary.
oh,
But you were using flashcards uh, to
yes, yes,
help. Talk
yes.
about that.
I basically went through the seminary with my ex-wife because as she was learning, you know, the 2-year program, learning all about the 12 powers and the 5 basic unity principles and you know all these kinds of things, I was helping her because I'm a very you know participatory person, so I would help her with her studies and prepare for some of her exams and things like that. So you know. I learned a lot about unity in those years, and of course, playing at unity churches and speaking when asked, I learned a lot. I've always, for whatever reason, far beyond my knowing, unity has always just somehow been a part of my life. You know, the Buddhist temple was located inside a unity church. And that's where I started going. You know, I didn't do too much with the Unity side. I was with the TBC side. But then, you know, I met this person and she became the associate minister. And so I started doing some additional things because I knew how Unity operated. They enjoyed meditation. They enjoyed chanting. They enjoyed all kinds of things. And so that was right up my alley.
Well, and there were some other interesting little dynamics because Ben had built a wonderful following, and something happened, and the following had diminished at Unity Temple Buddhist Center. What happened?
Yeah, so well, and we don't actually know for sure, but at some point, Ben, and this is what's a beautiful thing about the Buddhist practice is there's no blame, there's no villain or victim, there's just causes and conditions. So at some point, the causes and conditions for Ben to direct the Temple Buddhist Center at Unity Temple, those causes and conditions dissipated and went away. And we know that they all do. That's impermanence, right? So the causes and conditions went away. Ben left Unity Temple, and I followed him. And the Sangha started up at a little church down the road called St. Garibald's Armenian Church. So we started working there, and one of my classmates took over the Buddhist temple at Unity Temple, and she ran it for about 7 or 8 years, and it went very, very, very well. But then the causes and conditions for her to be the director dissipated. And so that's when the community kind of fell into a little bit of disarray. And that was about 2015, 2016, which is right when I went on sabbatical in 2017 and started hanging around. And that's why Duke brought me in and said, hey, you know, things are not going well here for the Buddhist group. And I know that you used to be here because he remembered me when I was meeting with Ben there at the Temple Buddhist Center. So he said, hey, I want to go in a new direction with the new director, and I think you're the person for the job.
And you just were excited and grateful and said yes?
Yeah.
Or did you have some hesitancy?
Oh yeah, yeah, because this was a very scary time, leaving, 23 years of teaching, moving into something that I did not feel secure about. Leading a sangha, I've never done that before, and I don't know what it entails. So it was very scary, but something in me knew that this was kind of what was happening all along. At that point, about 56 years of living had prepared me for that moment. And so I said yes. And it wasn't very long. It was probably about 3 or 4 months into it that I realized that, oh my gosh, everything has been preparing me for this. This is what is, this is right in line. This is in flow with everything, my heart, the universe, whatever it was. Because it's so interesting, because when we're in flow, when we're in line with universal principles, whether that's Buddhism or unity, then it becomes effortless efforting. Stuff just started showing up by the dozens, and I couldn't understand. I'm not asking for anything, but here it all comes. People started showing up wanting to help with this, wanting to help with that, and I literally just had to pick up my feet, buckle my seatbelt, and enjoy the ride. And I'm still doing that now. And it's so amazing how there's no efforting. It's effortless efforting.
And how many services did Temple Buddhist Center have when you went there?
So when I was first going, we just had one on Sundays. We would have one service about 10:30, or no, actually it was 9 o'clock. It was 9 o'clock on Sundays. And so, and then when I came, and that was when I first started back in 2004 up till about 2009 when Ben left and I went with him. And then I kind of dropped out of Sangha and was staying with Ben and the Sangha that was forming around him. And then when I came back in 2017, the Sangha had really depleted quite a bit. There was nobody there really nurturing it. Once Janet, her name was Nima, was her spiritual name. Once she left, it really started to falter and have problems. And so I picked it up in 2017, and now we're up to almost 300 people a Sunday in 2 services. So the 300 a Sunday, it does include 75 people who join online each Sunday as well. So
that is quite amazing for me to see, because the attendance in the Temple Buddhist Center surpasses the attendance in the main unity service, which has only one service, but of course a huge sanctuary.
Yeah, it certainly does right now.
And of course, there's an online audience for the main unity service too.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love about the way you work with the Buddhist service, and I don't go every week there because I'm a unity minister and I'm really wanting to support the redevelopment of the main unity service after the pandemic, which was when it went through its tough times.
Yes.
But I love the way you talk to the children. You have a wonderful children's ministry.
We are very blessed in that respect. A lot of families showing up. We have a youth and meditation program, and I certainly stand on the shoulders of giants in that respect. Yes, I love the kids tremendously. I mean, remember, I taught for 23 years, so I love kids. I'm really am just a big kid, frankly. Like I said, I'm 62 going on 14 or less. So I really love children. And Beth Sarver started come. She used to come to TBC before I was director, and then when she heard that things had switched and changed and there was a new director and things were changing, she kind of wanted to come and check it out out of curiosity. And so she started attending and coming, and she was leading a school called KC Restoration School, which is not Montessori and not Sullivan, but it's one of those special schools where, you know, it's democratically run. The kids kind of vote on, you know, do I want to do science or math today? You know, what, you know, kinds of things. So she had a real vision for a strong and supportive school model that really was kid-centered. And so I met her and we started talking, and she said, I'd love to help, you know, build a youth program. And so now she's doing, I just can't, her creativity is just out of this world. Last Sunday, she had the kids building karma kebabs. So so they were literally looking at this big bowl of all kinds of berries and fruits and things, and then trying to determine, you know, which fruit really encompassed the certain properties of, you know, some aspect of the Buddhist practice. So, you know, like the Eightfold Path, you know, so, you know, they would talk about, well, this raspberry, you know, sometimes when I say things I wish I didn't say, you know, I feel like a raspberry. So they would put that on the karma kebab, you know, and then they would, so she would work with them like that, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. And then of course we get to eat the karma kebab at the end. So it was really great.
The other thing that has impressed me about knowing you is not too long after I arrived in Kansas City and was attending some of the Buddhist service, not because of you, because I didn't know who you were, but I knew Robert Brummett.
Oh, yes.
And well, look, and we'll come back to him, but back to one of the things that happened, you were invited to come to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Yeah, that was again, you know, as I was mentioning earlier, you know, when you're in alignment, you know, with universal principles and with your values and your heart, I have no idea. I mean, when people talk about an abundant universe, I now understand. So stuff just shows up. And so I got an email from the Department of Health and Human Services. And at first I thought it was just more spam or more silly stuff, but I kind of read it and I thought, well, this is interesting. And so I responded back to it. And then I got an email from the lady that was leading this program. And she said, we really want you to be on our Zoom group. We're going to do a Zoom collective group where we're going to be talking with priests, imams, rabbis, pastors, you know, and we don't have anybody really from the Buddhist programs that actually responded to us. So we would love for you to represent, you know, Buddhism on this. And so I went to the Zoom meeting, and it was all about the intersection of mental health and communities of faith. And the reason why is because right now there is a tremendous need, a thirst for mental health professionals. And the thing is number one, there's not near enough to go around. And they're all located in cities. They're not located in rural settings. And there's still a stigma around mental health. A lot of people won't go and talk to a counselor because that's like an admission that there's something wrong with me. So what's picking up the slack are communities of faith. That's where people are going to get their mental health needs. And it's, you know, it's technically, it's not exactly the right fit, but it's the one that is organically growing. So people are coming to the faith community. So after the Zoom meeting, they said, we really like what you're saying. We like what you're doing at Temple Buddhist Center. We want you to come to Washington for our big conference on this topic. And we're going to put together a manual that we can send out to all communities of faith on ways that they can up their game regarding mental health. Because frankly, causes and conditions, right? Frankly, that's where people are going for their mental health needs, is to communities of faith. And it's very interesting. It may not be what we want or intended, but that's what's happening. And so it was an amazing experience. And if I may, please forgive me if I'm boring everybody to tears, but I want to share a quick story with you. So there was, all these, like I said, rabbis, imams, priests, pastors, reverends, just a room filled about 30 people, and they would do the roll call, and there was God is great and praise Allah, and all kinds of these little things they're throwing out. And then there was one, go Chiefs. There's the one Buddhist in the room. I was actually just trying to be funny, but what was so amazing in my experience is I was there surrounded by all these people, and many of them had very, very deep practices and a deep faith, and many of them very, very religious. And then here's, Victor, the Buddhist practitioner, and they didn't really kind of know what to do with me, but I would go with everybody. We'd go get lunch, or we'd go get dinner or coffee. And they would, they'd all take hands, and they would just pray vigorously. And they didn't kind of know what to do when it came time to, do I take Victor's hand? You're a Buddhist, do you pray? I was like, hallelujah, yes, absolutely. Let's take hands, let's pray. And a lot of my members at the Sangha, the community, were kind of like, yeah, but you're not Christian. Isn't that kind of disingenuous? And I said, no, not at all. Because for me, my purpose there was not to debate theology. My purpose there was not to correct people. My purpose there wasn't to proselytize Buddhism. My purpose there was to share in their joy. As long as it's not hurting anybody, to share in their joy. And if that's a joy around their religion, a joy around their faith, a joy around the community being together, that was my only job, was to open my heart to their joy and experience that with them. I don't have to intellectually or conceptually believe all the different things that are being said, but I can open my heart and feel their joy. And that was why I was there.
That is so beautiful, Victor. And what I was also impressed with immensely was when you told me that in those large gatherings where you would sit around and talk about these things, there were also members of the president's office.
Staff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very nice meeting White House staff who attended. There's definitely this is a very big problem. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but a report came out just, I think, today or yesterday, and it's an annual report on the top 5 happiest countries of the world. And of course, Finland won again. 7 years straight, Finland is the happiest country in the world. But guess who fell off the list? Yeah, the United States fell off. And we already know that loneliness is at epidemic proportions in our country. Suicides, especially among young people, are up. So, we are struggling as a culture and a society, and this idea about happiness is really becoming an issue and a problem. I mean, look at all the books that are coming out. What was it, Dan Harris's book, 10% More Happiness, or Sharon Salzberg's book, Real Happiness. I mean, this is what everybody's publishing, right? Because people are not happy.
So for me, that was profound and wonderful that you, from Unity on the Plaza, the Temple Buddhist Center housed at Unity on the Plaza, were invited to Washington, D.C. to talk about the future, to talk about mental health, to talk, whatever the dialogue was about would have been significant. But I was profoundly impressed. So I just want to touch on Robert. I want to, at one point in time, have him as a guest. But until we get Robert in person, just tell us a little bit about Robert Brummett.
So I was, of course, aware of Robert because my wife had gone through the seminary. And then she graduated, and I was asked to lead Temple Buddhist Center, and so off we went on our little, co-ministry adventure. And so I knew of Robert Brummett then, but then it kind of got away, and we were doing our thing. And then Robert had some surgery done, was in the hospital, so Neen and I went and visited him. And so I was kind of keeping up the relationship. And then the seminary then closed as far as being a physical location. And I'm not sure, Marj, what year that was. Maybe 2018, maybe 2019, somewhere right around there it closed. And I found out that they closed and they kind of let many of the teachers go. And so that's when I called Robert and I said, Robert, you always, everything that you teach, even though it's under the heading of unity, there's so many really deep Eastern practices and Buddhist practices. And he's like, yes, because he went through Spirit Rock and became a community Dharma leader. So Buddhism has always been a part of Robert's path, as well as many other things, And so when I discovered that the seminary closed, I was like, Robert, come here, come to TBC, and you can teach classes, you can do Dharma talks, stuff like that. And he was elated. I mean, this again, synchronicity, the causes and conditions of that moment allowed Robert an opening to come to TBC, and it's been such a huge blessing to have his friendship, mentorship, his guidance through all this, because remember, I wasn't technically ordained as a minister, so I feel now that I've gone through the seminary, because after 7 years of in the trenches, and of course having Robert's guidance, I've learned so much.
And he's an amazing soul. And he was on the ministerial school. They called it ministerial school staff, teaching staff when I was in ministerial school. They weren't yet even calling it seminary. And so Robert and I have known each other forever. And I've had him come to Unity of Tustin a couple of times.
Oh, yay.
And seeing him at conferences. I dearly love Robert. When I've been in Kansas City, I've attended some of the things he's done, classes and things, and he's an amazing soul. He's a beautiful teacher.
Yes.
And the main reason I showed up to begin with at Temple Buddhist Center was because I wanted to hear Robert.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I came there and was quite amazed to see a whole lot of former Unity ministers now attending Temple Buddhist Center and saying, this is where we feel fed. and so it's more and more, the oneness is happening to us. It's not that we're creating the oneness consciously, perhaps, but it's happening to us. We are in the field of that oneness, and it sort of drips down.
Yeah.
And I liken it to the Kundalini. There's one side that is descending and the other side ascending, and this Kundalini experience is going on simultaneously all of the time.
Yeah.
And both and then one Sunday, Robert showed up at Temple at the Unity's main service at Duke's invitation.
Yeah.
And did the talk. And he talked about the fact that he had been a Unity minister for over 40 years.
Wow.
And he had been a Buddhist practitioner for over 30 years. And there was no conflict. It was really that the focus was a little bit different. That Unity focuses more on creation, and that's where my focus has been, the creation story. My book is all about that.
Yeah.
And applying the codes of the soul to the creation story and how it works in your life in different stages and states. And Buddhist path was a descending path, and it was about descending into the original source, the oneness,
Mhm.
and so one was more of a creation focus, the other was more of an inner focus, the
Mhm.
within, the Christ
Yeah.
within, and the realization of that. And I'm sure I'm not saying it the same way Robert would, which is partly why I'm going to invite him to come on one of these calls at some
Yes.
time. It's quite incredible. And it
Mhm.
happens when its timing is right.
Yes.
It's really fascinating to me that one of the things I always saw was the potential of being on humanities team in their annual summit. And I even went to a retreat one time with Barbara Marks Hubbard where Steve Farrell was there. And I met Steve and gave him a copy of my book. And um, very, very fascinating. I was initiating it. Nothing happened. And yet, when I was here in Kansas City, Ross and I had gotten acquainted in Boulder when my brother died, and he was helping me with some estate things, and Mary was helping me. And it was so amazing to work with them, to be with them. And Robert called me one day here in Kansas City and said, how would you like to be on the annual summit for humanities team? I think it would be a perfect reboot
Yeah.
for Called by Love Institute. And I said, I would love it. And he said, there's only one condition. Always ways that the universe works. He said, you know Andrew Harvey better than we do, better than Steve Farrell knows him,
Yeah.
better than I know him. I
Yeah.
don't never met him. Steve Farrell has um, had him on humanities team before. We would love to have you and Andrew come on our annual summit, and I will host your call. So Ross and Andrew Harvey and I
Yeah.
all were on that call, and it was an hour-long call.
Yeah.
Guess who was the head of the annual summit for humanities team? Garth, who is now on
Oh, Garth. Oh.
recommended by Dee on humanities team when Mary asked Dee for recommendations of someone who could help us with getting some of the shifts in place.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the universe
Yeah.
makes it work. And
Yeah.
we don't know how. We just have to be open to
Mhm.
those moments in time when the universe is arranging our lives. The universe is showing us the way.
Yeah.
And I have amazing kinds of awareness of what can happen. And I'm looking at the time. We only have about 15 minutes
Oh,
left on this call. And Garth, are there any people who have their hands raised or who you want to bring forward? Do you want to speak, Garth, and tell people how to raise their hands, um, how to participate if they'd like to talk about their own lives, what Victor said or I said that might have triggered some of the things in their own life. Now, that could include you, Garth. Um, uh, I, I see a hand raised, and let's go to that caller.
Go ahead.
Hello?
There you go. Go on.
Hi. Hi, Marj. Laurel, how
Oh,
are you?
Laurel. I recognize your voice.
Oh,
Beautiful,
I
beloved
know
Laurel. We have
I
co-taught
got bumped
together.
off. I got bumped off before. I thought, what happened? And I had to go call back in. So I thought, oh, I hope they let me back in. Because, you go to this waiting room. And I thought, oh, I hope they let me back in. And they let me back in right away. So I'm so happy about that. Well, I just love this call so much.
Aw.
And you know what, Marge? I did not realize how much I missed these calls. You have to keep doing them now forever and no more breaks. Because they're just so. I want to share something, but I want to say something first. So I'm also 64 this year,
Ah,
and
yay!
yeah, and I met you 30 years ago, so I've known you a long time, and I want to say that it just strikes me how everybody that you meet, how you just like encourage them and inspire them to find their path, to know what their purpose is, and you encourage them to live from that place, and you know everybody's story, you know everybody's connections and how this led to here and how that led to there, and so many people that it's just incredible to me. So I just wanted to say that because we cherish you. So I just wanted you to know that.
Yay.
Uh, uh, Laurel, you have just been a treasure in my life. You know the Kabbalah forward and backward, left side, right side. You know all of the gateways to the soul that the Kabbalah represents. And I used to love co-teaching with you. And it was very similar to teaching with David now when we used to do East meets West. And he's now in India, Swami Brahmananda. If we could figure out how to get the time zones working together, I'd love to have him on one of these calls. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, Laurel. And your awareness of the Kabbalah is exquisite. You have taught me things that I didn't know as a result of my background in fundamentalist Christianity. I was never exposed to the kinds of things that you integrated throughout your entire lifetime relative to the path, the ascending. Is there a descending path in the Kabbalah, or is it all ascending?
Well, there is no you come down, you come down, and then for the purpose of then going back up. So
There
yes,
it
you're
is.
descending because your soul comes down, and it makes this first. It's that lech lecha, to go forth from in Genesis. Go forth. It's lech lecha, go forth, and that's your soul coming down through the upper worlds to take part, in a body, and then it's this process of knowing your purpose here and doing that and getting those glimpses, and then you're going back up and you're back ascending. So yes, there is a descending.
See, you explained it so well. I wouldn't have known how to do that.
Oh,
And what I know, and that's what I want to dedicate the rest of my life to, is to be a generalist that knows these kinds of connections with people who hold expertise way beyond where I am in my path as coming out of traditional Christianity. And now as 30 plus years as a unity minister, which takes me into mysticism, but it doesn't take me into the kinds of deep soul integrations that you're talking about relative to the Kabbalah, or the ones that some of the people who came to Unity of Tustin to teach. I began to realize that I was traveling all over the country to learn from spiritual teachers, trying to bring it back, and I wasn't nearly as good at it as they were. And that's when I started bringing them to Unity of Tustin, because we could have a group of people, and you were often in those groups, Laurel. We could have a group of people who would do a 5-day intensive with someone like Adyashanti or Andrew Harvey or Russ Hudson doing the Enneagram. And people began to look at Unity of Tustin as the place they wanted to come to sort of field test their highest, newest awarenesses that were dropping in. Russ used to call it downloads. And he said, the place I want to teach first on the things that are brand new to me is Unity of Tustin, because I know you will be supportive of whatever is emerging. And I loved being supportive of whatever is emerging. I think there's something emerging online now beyond where almost, I would say 98% of the online teachers are not opening into the all that is in the same way I want to. And I'm so grateful that we can have calls like this where I can learn from Victor and I can learn from you. I can learn from Garth. I can learn from Marla about her experience in the 12 steps. So many ways. So anything else, Laurel, you would like to share before
I do this really quickly, so I won't take up too much time, but I loved in the beginning when you were just talking about God and how he wants that relationship and how he's seeking us out. And it just reminded me of, from Song of Songs, there's this verse, I am asleep, but my heart is awake. The sound of my beloved is knocking, open to me, open to me. And that comes directly from Shira Shirim, which is the Song of Songs. Well, there's Midrash. Midrash it means to seek out. It's interpretation, line by line, of what the sacred text is. And so there's Midrash, Shira Shirim Rabbah 5. So it's seeking out, going deeper. And the Midrash for this, from this, goes like this. Rabbi Yossi says that Hashem, God, says to us, my children, open for me an opening of teshuvah. Teshuvah is known as repentance, but it literally means to return. Make me an opening of returning to me, of reaching out to me, of coming to me, the size of the point or the eye of a needle, and I'll open for you doorways which are large enough that chariots or wagons can come through. And that's what it's like. God is waiting for us to just reach out. He's knocking on the door. He's knocking on the door. And all we have to do is open it just a tiny little bit, and we will see, just talk about awakening, like it's transformational. That relationship is it's just, there's nothing like it. And so I just was thinking of this when you started to open the call, and I just love how you talk, and I just love listening to you talk, and I thought, oh wow, this is just, you just want to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and just want to connect all that more. And just think about it, because, if we're asleep, but okay, but there's that part of us, that God lives within us, where it's taught in the Tanya, which is sacred text, mystical text, that God's exhale is our soul. God's soul lives within us, and he breathes us moment by moment. He never stops. And so when we could connect to that breath within us, in fact, the Hebrew word for breath is the same word for soul, the same letters, just one little dot in a vowel changes. And when we can connect to that oneness and that nourishment and that nurturing, there's nothing like it. So it's just opening up, and all we have to do is open a teeny tiny bit, and he's right there to help us. He's just right there, waiting, knocking at the door. Knock, knock. So with these calls again, Marj, you're opening a doorway for everyone who comes in. You're opening a path and a doorway for people to expand and to really connect in such a deep place. and to really know why they're here.
Thank
So
you
you're such a
so
gift.
much. Really, really beautiful. Thank you. And Garth, is there anyone else?
Nobody's got their hand up or put a question in the chat, so I think not.
All right. You know, it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. Barbara, I'm so happy to see you on these calls. You have been a total, total gift in my life. And I'm so grateful for the gifts that you've brought into my life. And Mary, any updates on Holy Child that's coming in?
No, they're still in early labor. Both of them. The dog is laying right next to her and being very protective and attentive.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah. So he can't go to the birthing center, but he's there. I don't know if you
Oh,
can.
look at that. Oh, oh, he's
Yeah.
right there. That's so
Well,
sweet.
I didn't know if we would have time to share this, but one of the things I often do, and I want to at some point in time bring some people in that understand the expertise of these things better than I do. But I look at the transits in astrology every single morning. And during this call, there's been a really, really important transit happening. There is a replay of the energy that brought about very delicate conversations around very sensitive topics. And I thought, oh my God, this is the perfect moment where Victor's going to talk about his birth father, and where he will talk about the first 3 years of his life that he doesn't remember, and how in the next years of his life, he meant the person that he called his father, the only father he's ever known. And he takes that name into the lineage that he leaves in the world. And it's so amazing. And as the call proceeded today, one of the transits involved Mercury in Aries, and it was contraparallel Venus in Pisces. If you love them, set them free. Your destiny is not identical to, and that's okay. So what you did in your life, Victor, was to set the destiny of your birth father free for him to fulfill on his own. And it wasn't the same as your destiny path, and that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, and if you want, since we only have about 2 minutes left, if you want to, Marj, I can do just a little chant for us.
I would love that.
To kind of to come together and end our time together on that kind of a note. And it's very,
if you go a few minutes over, it's okay.
Oh, I won't go very long. And actually, Garth, if I may, I appreciate you're a wonderful attendant, but I'd actually like to go back to galleries mode, and I'll tell you why. Because I want everybody to be able to see everybody. And I know that, is it Laura or Laurel that's calling in? Laurel.
Uh-huh.
So she can't physically see us, because she's calling in, but she can hear us and she can still participate. And so can Kathleen, I think, because she's on her phone as well. But it's just a little chant, and it's the only part that you chant together, if you'd like to, is Namaste, which many of us already know that in the Sanskrit tradition, Namaste, for the most part, means the light in me sees the light in you. So it's just this recognition expression of our divinity seeing each other, seeing itself really through all these different bodies. So
And before you start the chant, I
Yeah.
want to mention that in the email, there is a link to your website that is all about the music you've written and the things that are available on your music website. And so music is a big passion in your life.
yes.
And I know that that's also a big passion in Mary's daughter's life, the mother of this baby that's coming in. One of the reasons she went to Austin, Texas. And so I invite people to click on the link that's in the reminder email about your website, about your music. So go ahead, Victor.
Thank you. And so what I'll do is you can form the Anjali Mudra if you want, and just pick a face. Just pick a face on the screen here. This is a little song that came through me, and it's based on Namaste. So just pick a face, and you're going to send Namaste, or let the light in me sees the light in you, and then we'll move to a different one after that. So here we go. So when the light in me, Namaste, sees the light in you, Namaste, then with my hands together, I bow to you, Namaste. Now pick a new face. So when the love in me, Namaste, sees the love in you, Namaste, then with my hands together, I bow to you, Namaste. All right, pick one more face and send them all the love in your heart. So when the peace in me, Namaste, sees the peace in you, Namaste, then with my hands together, I bow to you, Namaste. Namaste, everyone.
Oh, how beautiful it is. And so I think we'll let that be our final song. And if you want to just strum a little bit more as we sort of say
Yes.
goodbye and look in each other's eyes.
Thank you everyone so much for letting me share.
And let me tell you that next month, Steve Farrell, the director of Humanities team, is going to be our guest on this call.
Yay.
I'm so thrilled about that. So much love, everyone.
Thank you, Marj. Thank you, Garth. Thank you, everyone. Peace and blessings.
Bye.